Virgil Kane is my name, and I served on the Danville train till Stoneman's cavalry came and tore up the tracks again. In the winter of '65, we were hungry, just barely alive.
Lincoln is not a president for the South states. He doesn't understand our needs nor way of life, and therefore we cannot remain passive. We must defend our economy and way of life. We will not bow to the North.
We can't tolerate this. America should be united under one flag. The Confederation must be stopped in their plans to split this glorious country in two. We went to election on the slavery question. Therefore, we must do everything in our power to unify this country once again and free all slaves.
The American Civil War, 1861 to 1865, also known as the War between the States and several other names, was a civil war in the United States of America. 11 southern slave states declared their secession from the U.S. and formed the Confederate States of America, also called the Confederacy, led by Jefferson Davis. They fought against the U.S. federal government, known as a Union, which was supported by all the free states and the 5 border slave states. In the presidential election of 1860, the Republican Party, led by Abraham Lincoln, had campaigned against the expansion of slavery beyond the states in which it already existed. The Republican victory in that election resulted in 7 southern states declaring their secession from the Union, even before Lincoln took office on March 4th, 1861. Both the outgoing and incoming U.S. administrations rejected secession, regarding it as a rebellion.
We must take up arms against the North. We do not fear the size of North's army. We have the best trained and experienced officers and commanders, and therefore the best organization. And the organization is the key to win any war.
It seems clear to me now that the South will not give without a fight. We will be prepared. We have a stronger military and the best generals. When they come, we will stand up and we will win.
Oh, I'm a good old rebel, now that's just what I am. And for this Yankee nation, I do not give a damn. I'm glad I fought again, I only wish we'd won. I ain't asked any pardon for anything I've done. I hates the Yankee nation and everything they do. I hates the Declaration of Independence too. I hate...
Hostilities began on the 12th of April in 1861 when Confederate forces attacked a U.S. military installation at Fort Sumter in South Carolina. Lincoln responded by calling for a volunteer army from each state, leading to declarations of secession by 4 more southern slave states. Both sides raised armies as the Union assumed control of the border states early in the war and established a naval blockade. In September 1862, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation made ending slavery in the South a war goal and dissuaded the British from intervening. Confederate Commander Robert E. Lee won battles in the east, but in 1863 his northward advance was turned back at Gettysburg, and in the west the Union gained control of the Mississippi River at the Battle of Vicksburg, thereby splitting the Confederacy. Long-term Union advantages in men and material were realized in 1864 when Ulysses S. Grant fought battles of Attriation against Lee, as Union General William Sherman captured Atlanta, Georgia, and marched to the sea. Confederate resistance collapsed after Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on the 9th of April in 1865.
We have been forced to surrender. There are too many and our people are starving. Too many of our men have died in the war. But the Southern spirit lives on, and I know that the South will rise once again.
I'm glad to say that the war is finally over. Davis has announced that the South will put down their weapons. The costs have been high, but the victory is priceless. I'm certain that a unified America is a strong America.
The results of the American Civil War. Slavery effectively ended in the US in the spring of 1865, when the Confederate armies surrendered. All slaves in the Confederacy were freed by the Emancipation Proclamation, which stipulated that slaves in Confederate-held areas were free. Slaves in the border states and Union-controlled parts of the South were freed by the state action on December 6, 1865, by the 13th Amendment. The full restoration of the Union was the work of a highly contentious post-war era known as Reconstruction. The war produced about 1,030,000 casualties, which was 3% of the population, including about, as said earlier, 620,000 solid deaths, 2/3 by disease. The war accounted for more casualties than all other US wars combined. The causes of the war, the reasons for its outcome, and even the name of the war itself are subjects of lingering controversy today. About 4 million black slaves were freed in 1861 to 65. Based on 1860 census figures, 8% of all white males aged 13 to 43 died in the war, including 6% in the North and extraordinary 18% in the South. One reason for the high number of deaths during the war was the use of Napoleonic tactics such as charges. With the advent of more accurate rifle barrels and, near the end of the war for the Union Army, repeating firearms such as the Spencer repeating rifle and a few experimental Gatling guns, soldiers were decimated when standing in lines in the open. This gave birth to trench warfare, a tactic heavily used during World War I.
Only a few days after the war ended, on April the 14th in 1865, Abraham Lincoln was shot while attending a performance of Our American Cousin at Ford's Theatre with his wife and 2 guests. His assassin was a Southern actor and Confederate sympathizer known as John Wilkes Booth, and although President Lincoln was shot so closely after the war ended, he had had enough time to achieve his 2 greatest goals: unifying the United States of America and ending slavery.
The difference between the states in the North America and the South America are big even today. The people in the South states are even today much more conservative than the people in the North. They are also more religious, while in the North we have the sects like the New Age or the Scientologists and much other new religions, if we call them like that. These new religions has begun to escalate the last 50 years in the North of America. From the economic aspect, the South states are not as successful as their neighbors in the North. For an example, there are much more industrial factories in the North. Although it's quite impressive that the people in the South states, Texas or Virginia for example, still have the old values such as the nuclear family and the traditional values. About 110 million people live in the 16 states which goes under the category South state. At the end of the 19th century, white Democrats in the South had created state constitutions that were hostile to industry and business development. Banking was limited, as was access to credit. States persist in agricultural economies. In that what is known as the North States, there is about 190 million inhabitants, and the region is much more rich than the South. The highest income place in the United States are usually considered to be the Northeast. 23 of the 100 highest income counties per capita income are located in the Northeast. But of course there are lots of regional difference also. Politically there is some paradox. The states with lower average income often vote on the Republican, although the Republicans have a higher average income.
Vänta, tyst.